Hi guys, welcome back to my channel as we go through the Law of One raw material, and we are starting with section 1, lesson 1, and we are going to start with the definitions. And let's start with the word that we hear constantly throughout all the books, and that is the word Adonai. Adonai is how Ra ends every channeling session. And Adonai is a Hebrew word. It can mean the Lord or the Master. It was God's title to use as God's name. And there was a plural aspect to Adonai. And the reason why Ra uses it is because he's trying to use the best words to get across of the infinite creator, the Lord of Lords. You know, it's an encompassing word for everything. And that's the reason that Ra uses it at the end of every session that is given as a closed captioning that he is working for the Law of One. He is working for the infinite creator to all lords and to all gods. So it's a word that perfectly captures his work. And you'll notice at the start of every channeling session, they go through quite the procedure to put Carla in a trance and surround her by love and light and protect her while she's channeling. Because essentially she's going to be an open door and she's allowing the Ra collective to walk through that door to use her. So they have to go through quite the procedure to give her protection. And you do notice that throughout the books. It's always about how is the instrument, because it's the most important aspect through the channeling sessions. So you hear the term social memory complex, which is a large group of completely ingraded souls. I talked about this a little bit in my introduction about who Ra is. He is a social memory complex where you can have like an entire planet of souls that have spent eons together, millions and millions of years together, going through their lives, reincarnating together, doing soul contracts together. And after you get to sixth density, and when you have spent so much time with each other, you basically almost merge together, because at that point, it's pretty useless to ever experience being separate from each other, and you form a complex together, and that's what Ra is. They love each other so much, they just want to occupy the same body. They turn into kind of a hive mind complex. They're in this together because they love each other so much. They don't want to experience separatism. And that is the social memory complex of what Ra is. And, humans will get there in several million years from now when we go to sixth density. The native souls of Earth that incarnated on Earth throughout the densities will form their own social memory complex. And another one is the mind, body, spirit complex. Now that pertains to the individual, the person, the human, the entity that has free will. So when you're in first, when you're in second, and when you're in third and fourth, you are a mind, body, spirit complex. When you're in an incarnation and you give off a certain frequency that is your own, it's the I am, when you are the mind, body, spirit complex. It's what you are before you form the social memory complex. So whenever you hear mind, body, spirit complex, that means the person. Carla is a mind, body, spirit complex. I am a mind, body, spirit complex. Because only when you're incarnated are you all three of those, because your higher self is simply your spirit complex, right? When you don't have a body, when you're in between lives, you're the mind spirit complex. But when you're incarnated, it's the mind, body, spirit complex. It's the combination of the three that form you as a human here on Earth. Catalyst. So that's a word that gets used a lot. It's the stimulus for growth, something that presents a challenge and an opportunity to learn a lesson. So catalyst is the bigger lessons, I would say. Something that provokes a lesson to be learned. Say you're a drinker and you drove drunk and you got into a drunk driving accident. And after that, you recognized the situation you were in and you quit drinking. So you can say that that drunk driving accident was the catalyst for you to learn to stop drinking and start a new chapter in your life. So it's a bit of a bigger lessons that you learn in life. So when you hear that word catalyst, it is pay attention. This is not just a daily thing that you're learning or you're supposed to change. I mean, these could be life-changing things that is a catalyst of, like sometimes an entire lifetime can be based on this one catalyst for you to learn this one thing. I'll be going through densities 1 through 6 pretty deeply. 7th density and up, it's not as clear, and even Ra won't talk about the 7th density because he doesn't have first-hand knowledge about what it's like. Ra is in 6th density, late 6th density, and they really are moving fast towards 7th. Because in 6th density, you're learning to heal worlds, and that's what Ra is doing. Because as you get higher in the densities, you get into a higher level of consciousness, a higher octave. The densities are organized into an 8-fold octave. So once you go past 7th density, you fold into like a whole new octave. And I'll deep dive more into that. Another way to describe a density is also to mirror it or put it next to the word dimension. Now, dimension is something that is tangible, something that like our physical reality is in a dimension, but our thoughts and the consciousness that gets applied to it is the density, the consciousness part of it. Kind of the way your laptop or whatever device you're listening on, the actual device that you can hold in your hand and touch, that is the dimension. The density would be like the software that's running it. So think of our world as like that and all the densities like that. The densities and dimensions match, and they have to match. You can't run, you can't get a Commodore 64 computer and try to run a Photoshop, 2023 on it. It would not work. So the densities and dimensions tend to match. They can bleed over and you can kind of visit them a little bit, but the level of consciousness applied to each dimension is in sync. Wanderer. So I know about wanderers because I am one. Now we will get more into a nice refined definition across the entire plane to say what a wanderer is, what a starseed is, what an indigo child is, there's a lot of terms out there, but Ra only really pertains to the wanderers. Now, a wanderer is a higher density soul that has volunteered to incarnate as a human, is what they use wanderers here. Now, wanderers don't have any specific abilities to any other human, because if you are going to be a wanderer, you agree to all the rules of 3rd density, and that includes going beyond the veil and forgetting who you are, where you came from. You only know this life, and all the rules to you have to apply to the rule of gravity, things like that. You have agreed to be fully immersed in 3rd density when you're a wanderer. Now you can go through upgrades, through awakenings and things like that, but the biggest fear of a wanderer is to not wake up during their incarnation. So a starseed is different. It's not necessarily a higher density soul. It just means that you're not a native of Earth. You can be Pleiadian, but you can also be in the Pleiadians as a 3rd dimensional being, and you have incarnated into Earth for a few lifetimes to experience Earth. Or a lot of starseeds, many starseeds wanted to be here during the transition to 4th density. So that is a little bit what's different between a starseed and a wanderer. A starseed simply means that you're not from here. You can come from different dimensions, 3rd dimension, 4th dimension, but as soon as you come from 4th and 5th dimension, you would be considered a wanderer. Okay, the harvest. A lot of people use the word harvest, and a lot of people use the word graduation when you go from density to density. So when we're going from 3rd density to 4th density, it's called a harvest. Now, it's a better word to use than to graduate, and the reason for that is if you've ever harvested something out of your garden, say you've harvested a bunch of grapes, when you have that batch of grapes, it's not a pristine batch, right? There's going to be little tiny bugs in there. There's going to be leaves and twigs and stems and all kinds of other things along with the harvest. And the same thing happens when you go from one density to the other. That's why you don't really want to call it a graduation. You want to call it a harvest, because in that harvest, we're not all going to have service to others and service to self. There's going to be a bit of a mix. The majority of it will be service to others. But as time goes by, just the same with a harvest, you're going to be picking out all those bugs and twigs and leaves and anything that doesn't belong as part of the fourth density service to others. So for us, when the harvest comes, we're going to move into fourth density, and there's still going to be a lot of negative entities here that are service to self when the harvest comes. But as we go through fourth density, we're going to pick apart that batch, and we're going to be left with just nothing but a pristine fourth density service to others. And that's why Ra uses the word harvest. He doesn't use the word graduation into fourth density. So that's an important part. Distortion. So we know the word distortion when something is distorted as, like say, you're distorting my view of something. The windshield of my car is so dirty, it's distorting my view of something. So because everything is one, all is one, we're all using the law of one, what changes is the distortion of things. And as things get distorted and we move through the distortion, we fold back into the octave of oneness with source energy. So distortions are there to guide us back to source in a way. And Ra uses the distortion. It can be used negatively, and Ra does refer to it as being negative sometimes. And you can say that like the Bible, the original writings of the Bible were meant in the best intentions for source energy and God, but there is so much distortion in the writings. So it makes it difficult to get there. Things like that. So the word distortion just gets used a lot with these books. And alignment. Alignment is a very important word that gets used when we're talking about the law of one and these channeling sessions, because the entire group had to be well aligned. Now, because you have to align with the law of one, you have to align with service to others. So we will deep dive, like it's an entire lesson to talk about service to others and service to self. So we're gonna get there. So when Carla and the group is doing these sessions, they had to be so well aligned, and the reason why they had to focus and align themselves with the law of one, with the kind of questions they were asking, and why they had to align themselves with service to others. They couldn't ask Ra about things that maybe have happened in the past, things about other people, things about the future. They couldn't ask questions like that because those are service to self questions. They had to keep in alignment with their questioning, and they had to walk that line for the narrow band that they were communicating with Ra. So it was very important to keep everything in alignment. The word alignment goes a lot broader in the sense that Ra talks about it when we're discussing these topics, because if you go out of alignment and you stray from communicating with Ra, that also allows negative entities to come in, because you are no longer servicing the infinite creator if you step away from that. So when you hear about how that gets talked about throughout the books, being in alignment and making sure every facet of what they were doing was in alignment with the law of one, with their questioning, it was for that reason. Because when things get misaligned and they go off track, they would lose the communication with Ra. And that's why these books are also such an amazing tool, because this is a channeling session that was done by scientists that were so kind of hell-bent on getting it right and keeping the channel open with Ra. And I think that that's where most channeling materials today are heavily distorted. And and I think everyone who does channeling that starts off on that path, they're not doing the processes to keep themselves in alignment with their questioning and their channeling. And that's why a lot of the channeling works that you hear today, if you follow a person that does channeling, throughout their channeling, you can almost see it shift and change, and it gets negative. They all of a sudden, the channels are talking about warning of catastrophes, and all of a sudden there's a lot of fear based in there. And that's an example of negative energies coming in like a wolf in sheep's clothing. You're no longer doing your original channels anymore, and it's distorted because you're misaligned. And it takes an extreme amount of work and care by an entire team to keep things in alignment. And that's why I truly trust these books and the pristineness that they put such efforts in to keep the alignment with Ra. Okay, moving on. The higher self. We've heard this a lot, but what does the higher self actually mean? It is you. Your higher self is you in 6th density. And you might ask yourself, well, if I'm in 3rd density, my higher self is in 6th density, but we're graduating to 4th and 5th density, how is my higher self already there? Because you are tethered to your higher self. So when the universe expands, the universe wants to know itself. It wants to expand and experience, and the more it can expand and experience, the more it knows who it is as an all-in-one encompassing. All of it is the law of one. So in its expansion from 6th density, it's like that's where the birth of a soul is, and it expands out into 1st density. So your higher self, when it first expands, it only knows 1st density. And as it gets harvested from 1st to 2nd to 3rd to 4th, you're constantly tethered to your higher self, but it does reside in 6th density. And the reason also for that is because that's where separation begins, in 6th density, as the universe is expanding. And as you move up through all the octaves, through all the densities, and turn into the 8th octave to fold over, when you fully merge back with self, everything that makes you separate, even being part of a social memory complex, that somewhat gets abandoned, and you fully immerse with source energy. And we have very high density beings, but we don't really look at them as individuals. We don't look at them even being a social memory complex. They won't have a name. They don't want a name, because even having a name would be an act of separation itself. But your higher self right now resides in 6th density, and you're always tethered to it. And even after you die and you're going through all these experiences, you don't fully emerge with your higher self in 6th density. You're simply tethered to it. And we're going to deep dive more into this when we talk about the higher self and how it pertains to the choice of 3rd density. And that should be a lot of fun. Intelligent infinity. We hear it a lot, and we know intelligent infinity is the entire universe. Everything that is encompassed in the infinite creator. It is everything. It gives you the platform for distortion to know itself better. And there's no end to it, there's no beginning to it, because it's all encompassing. So it's think of it like a hologram deck. The entire universe being a hologram deck that can do everything and anything that can possibly be imagined in order for the infinite creator to know itself better. The act of the universe expanding is the intelligent infinity. you'll start to have this certain knowledge and really understand what intelligent infinity is, as we are able to put together all the densities and dimensions of the universe and the octaves and the law of one together. So you won't have to just kind of rely on sound bites. You'll actually have a good understanding at the end of this lesson of what intelligent infinity is. And karma. Now, we think we have a good definition of the word karma. I don't like how a negative aspect of karma is always invoked here in our culture, but that's not really the way Ra uses karma. When he uses the word karma, he's saying it as a way to balance things, to interchange inertia, which is not changing, to karma, which is changing, as a way to balance. Karma is mostly transferable to inertia by forgiveness. You need duality in order to understand things, so you need karma. It's almost as if the universe wants karma to understand itself better, because if you didn't have something that required a balancing, you would never know what imbalance is. And the last word that I have for definition for this lesson is consciousness itself, but that almost needs its whole lesson. You will understand what the conscious mind and the unconscious mind really means by the end of these lessons, because it's more than just an awareness. It's more than just a frequency. It's more than just a movement through the densities that put together all of source energy with the awareness of consciousness. So I will actually define the word consciousness at the very end of all these lessons. And I'll hope to do it in a way that really makes a lot of good sense to everybody. And I'm hoping that it'll come across as such an effortless, meaningful explanation to this law of one material. So we're going to end this lesson here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So if you guys have a word that you would like me to define that Ross said in the books, just put it in the comments below and I'll be happy to define my understanding of it. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe as these lessons go forward, and we can build a great community here for the law of one. And in lesson 2, we're going to get started with the first, second, and third distortions of source consciousness. So let's look forward to the next lesson. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.